Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of the Sefer Kohelet, that is the book of Ecclesiastes. We are currently in the middle of chapter 5. We are about to read verse 7. In the beginning of this chapter, Kohelet taught us the importance of keeping our word in this life. And as you recall, I've pointed out that Kohelet bounces back and forth between two modes. It's the mode of observation and the mode of advice. The observation is always an observation of the meaninglessness and the fleetingness. That's not the best word there, but of the pleasures or of the advantages that we seek in this world. They're fleeting, they come and go, and therefore we should focus on living in the moment and living in the moment as properly as we can. And in the last chapter or two, he also zeroed in on the inability of us to fully understand and comprehend the purpose of our existence, the reason why things happen that seem unjust to us, both why good people suffer, why bad people prosper, especially the question of theodicy. And because we have no way of knowing or understanding that, we should focus on what we do have, and that is enjoying the pleasures that we have in the moment, enjoying this world that we are in, and living it properly, using our time that we have here appropriately. So in verse 7, he is again going to mention an observation that many of us see and feel all the time. And here he is looking at a society, and he is saying, if you look at the society around you and you observe as follows: Im oshek rosh, if oppression of the poor, v'gezel mishpat v'tzedek, and stealing and robbing the justice and righteousness, tireh b'medina, if that is what you see in the country in which you live and reside. Unfortunately, this is something which we see often and nowadays, and we've seen it throughout human history. Al titma al hachefetz, do not wonder, do not be surprised, in other words, over this thing, over this existence, the existence of injustice within the system. Ki gavoa me'al gavoa hashomer, because there is a guardian, there is an officer who is on top of the person that's on top, and gvohim alayhem, and there's people on top of them. Now, what does this mean? There is a guardian on top of the guardian. So most of the traditional commentaries understand this as a reference to God, and they say and thus it would mean, they would translate the verse as follows: if you see injustice, don't worry, because there is a God who is just, who will somehow rectify things in the end. That's one way of understanding this. Another way of understanding this is saying that if you see it, don't be surprised, just like we've seen a lot of things that we've discussed in these past several chapters, which we don't understand because there is a God above and we don't understand his ways. Not necessarily because he's going to clear things up in the end, but simply because we don't understand that. However, many more modern translations and some of the commentaries understand this actually to be referring to people, not to God. And it is stating, don't be surprised when you see one person being unjust towards another, or an official being unjust towards another, because he is observing that in the societies that we live in, it all comes down from the top. When you have an unjust system in charge, then we have an entire system of people oppressing the other. When the leader is corrupt, then everyone beneath him is corrupt, and so on and so forth. So this is an observation of how human societies, unfortunately, work, which would be much more consistent with the pattern of Kohelet until now, where he is making observations about what happens in the actual world around us, within we live. So al titma, don't be surprised, because this goes along with the same pattern that we've been discussing until now. It is unfair. If we look at it that way, then the next verse, which is very hard to translate, verse 8, and understand, as evidenced by the fact that pretty much every translation that you'll see of verse 8 is somewhat different than the others. But first I'm going to read it, and I'm going to show how it's so closely related to verse 7 and that it follows so well if we understand it in the third pattern, that it's referring to the pattern of human societies. V'yisron eretz bakol hu. And just to translate literally, and I'm going to translate as literally as possible for a minute, and you'll understand a little. If you don't understand the Hebrew, you'll at least understand what the difficulty is in translating it to the best that someone that can't read the Hebrew can get. And the advantage of land is in everything. Melach, a king, l'sadeh ne'avad, to a field that is worked. So if you don't understand that, then welcome to the club. Because a lot of commentaries a lot of translations try to translate this in ways that works. Now, if you understand that the shomer, that the person who is on top of those who are on top of those who are on top is referring to not a person but to God, then you would translate and understand this verse, also meaning that it is all the greatness remains in the hand of God. You'd understand this verse being teaching you that. However, if you think that the previous verse is referring to people, then you would translate it something as follows. And if you see the recent Koren Jerusalem Bible, they translate it in this way. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, not using their language, but I'm going to catch their idea. The Yisron Eretz, right? And the advantage of owning a piece of land is something that everyone will enjoy, right? In other words, yes, it is true that the world is unfair and unjust, but if you have a piece of land, in other words, he's flipping towards the advice. Again, this goes in the same pattern that Kohelet has been going in until now. He's giving us advice how to live in this world. The best thing you can do is have a piece of land, because then melech l'soden ne'avad, then you are the king, right, who is the king over the field that is being worked, right? So while it is true that within the society around you, you may not find something fair and something equitable, but at least you can enjoy the field that you are working. Because if you don't take land, and let's go to number 9, but rather you try your hand in business and you try to accumulate wealth in other ways, Ohev kesef lo yispa kesef. One who loves silver, one who loves money, will never be satisfied with money, right? If that's all you work for, you're always going to be working for more, for more, for more. It's never going to be enough. Umi ohev behamon, and he who loves large amounts of things as opposed to what the land can produce, there's a limit to how much the land can produce, right? It can hopefully produce enough to sustain you. But mi ohev be'amon lo tivu'ah. Now again, this is an extremely difficult phrase to translate. Literally it translates, and he who loves greatness lo will not tivu'ah have produce. Gam zehavel. This is also futile or vanity, or the way I'm translating hevel, this is also just like wind, just like breath, just like air. So again, verse 9 is a difficult verse to translate. So let me translate it again along the same lines, or at least along a similar path that we translated verse 8. He who loves money will never be satisfied with money, as opposed to he who understands that he has a piece of land and he works it. Umi ohev behamon, and someone who loves hamon, right, who loves just acquiring more and more, lo tivuah, will never have tivuah, which means produce. He will never have that satisfaction that one has from the work of his hands, the plain, simple satisfaction of working a field and harvesting the produce from the field. Gam zehavel, this is also like breath. In other words, this whole idea is just something that vanishes, something that goes away, right? In other words, the fact that people constantly looking after money, looking after money, looking after making more wealth, and then it just dissipates and disappears, that person, that is Hevel too. Why is that Hevel? Maybe a person of wealth will accumulate wealth, and that's great. He has all this money. Because, verse 10, Birevos hatova rabu ochleha. Oh, and by the way, I recently saw online Hevel being translated by Bruce Heitler. I see this online in the Sefaria. I do not have Bruce Heitler's translation myself, but he also translates Hevel as a vanishing mist, which is it's the same way that I've been translating it. And I've given you sources and reasons why I'm translating it that way, because I really believe that translating it as futility or vanity, which is the most common, is simply missing the boat, missing the entire point of pretty much the entire book of Kohelet, which is all about this vanishing mist, right? Vanishing mist. So anyway, Birevos hatova. So what's so bad? Maybe getting wealthy is a good thing. Maybe it's great. Birevos hatova, because the more goodness you have, rabu ochlea, then there's even more people coming to eat it, right? The person who's sitting on that wealth is the one who also has the most people who are jealous and the most people who are trying to take advantage and somehow take it away from him. Uma kishron liv aleha, right? And what special skill is there to he who owns it? Ki im re'us einav. All he has is the is that he did what he thought was the right thing to do. Now, there's many ways to understand this, and the way I understand this verse is that the person, in contrast to the person who works his field and eats from the produce of his field, the skill is the skill of his own hands, right? He did something physical, physical labor, and thus he ate the fruit of the work of his hands. The one who accumulates wealth in other ways, we tend to think, oh, he became rich because he's so smart, he's so skilled. But the truth is that that's not true. All he did was ru'ut einav. All he did was that which he thought would be right to do. And he basically got lucky, right? So it was not a result of skill. It was a result of ru'ut einav, just doing what he thought was right. Instead, verse 11, mitukash nasa oved, the sleep of the one who works his land, im ma'at ve'im harbe yochel, whether he eats a lot or a little, whether his field is small and only produces a little, or whether his field is large and he produces a lot, his sleep is sweet, his mitukah is sweet. What does that mean, his sleep is sweet? Well, on the one hand, he's not worried. He's not worried about all of those people that are trying to grab his wealth because he's not that wealthy. But really what this means is you sleep with a free conscience, knowing that it was the fruit of your own labor, right? And it was not through other means which may have been taking advantage of other people. It is purely of your own labor. I always give people advice, make sure to do something to my own children. Whatever you choose in life as a vocation, make sure that when you put your head down on the pillow at night, you can feel good about what you did all day, so that you can rest easy knowing that you worked hard and you ate of the fruit of your labor. V'hasava le'ashir, and the satisfaction and the abundance or greatness or wealth that the rich man has, einenu meniach lo lishon, it does not allow him to sleep, either because of all those people that are trying to grab it. He's constantly worried that the markets might not do so well tomorrow, but also because he can't sleep because he's not satisfied with what he did, right? He didn't do anything really to gain that. Yesh ra'achola, and there is a significantly sick, and literally he uses the word sick, evil. Ra'isi tachashasames. Again, this is observation. He's again flipping back and forth from advice, right, to observation. And here he's saying an observation. The particular evil is that I've seen in this world is osher shamur liba alav l'ra'aso, is that when wealth, which was so guarded by its owners, in the end, it turns out to hurt him rather than to help him. So instead of enjoying his wealth, enjoying the fruits of his labor, right? Instead, it turns out harming him, hurting him by, for starters, not letting him sleep at night, but also the Ovad ha'osher, this is verse 13, Ahu be'inyan ra. He can end up losing that osher. He can end up losing that wealth in a bad way, right? So he worked all his life for what? Just for wealth, right? And all that wealth goes away, right? V'holid bain, he can have a child, he can have a family, v'ein biyado mu'uma, and he has nothing to give them. He has nothing to sustain them with. This is the worst. When a person works and works and works and gets nothing. Kasher yatsa mibet and imo, just like he left the womb of his mother, right? Arom yashuv lolachas kisheba. He is going to return to that earth, right? Just the same way he came, with nothing. Uma lo yisov amalo, and there's not a single thing he's going to take from all of his labor sheyolech biyado that he will be able to take with him. Now, this, of course, is true whether we're referring to the farmer that owns a piece of land or the wealthy man, right? But the farmer at least enjoyed the moment when he had it. He had the metuka shnasoved. He had that sweet rest, right? He had he was the melech l'saden evod, like he said in verse 8. He was at least the king over his own field. V'gam zu ra'achola. This is a terrible, terrible evil. Kol umas sheba kain yelech. That however it is that he comes, that is the same way that he is going to leave this planet. Uma yisrono, and what has he gained? Sheya'amol la ruach, that he has worked so hard for something that is just ruach, just wind. The word ruach and hevel are used interchangeably throughout the book of Kohelet. Ruach meaning wind, hevel meaning breath, or air. Gam kol yamav bachoshech yochel. All of his days he eats in the darkness. What does it mean he eats in the darkness? He doesn't enjoy now when he eats the little bit of pleasure he has. He's not enjoying it. There's no daylight on that pleasure. He doesn't see it, he doesn't feel it, he doesn't experience it, he doesn't know it, right? V'chas harbe, and is constantly full of anger and consternation and anxiety. V'cholyo v'kotzef, and is full of worry and disappointment, right? And anger. This is that his entire life, right? How many times do we see people that live this way? No matter what they have in their life, they don't stop for a moment in the sun to enjoy what they have. Constantly worried about tomorrow, constantly worried about what's going to be next, constantly worried about where things are going, constantly worried about how they're going to make more money and make sure they don't lose money, and so on and so forth, rather than enjoying it right now. Hine ashero isi ani tov. What have I seen that is good, right? So he's going from observation now to advice. What is the right thing to do? Asher yafel le'achol v'lishtos v'lir'os tova b'chol amalo. It is much better. I have seen that what is good is that it is beautiful to eat and drink and see. In other words, in the light. See in the light all of the work that you work tachas hashamash in this world beneath the sun. Right? See it, feel it, experience it. Every day when you sit down, take that nice meal. Sit down with your family. Enjoy the time that you have. Do that experience. Do that thing that it is that you felt that you wanted to do, that you wanted to enjoy. Of course, properly, as he's been stating many times. But do it. Mispar yemei chayav asher nasan lo Elohim. During those numbered days which God has given him. Kihu chalko, because that is your portion. No one can deny that today, right now, what you have is what you have, and it's the portion that God gave you. Enjoy it now. Enjoy it at this moment. Gam kol ha'adam asher nasan lo Elohim osher u'nechasim. Because this is also true that any human being, any person, that God has given him wealth and property, v'hishlito, and he gave him the ability and le'achol mimenu, to eat, in other words, and to enjoy that wealth and enjoy that property, v'laseis es chalko, and to lift up his portion, to make the portion that God gave him, raise it up, right? Make it something special, V'lismoach ba'amalo, and to be happy as opposed to be and angry and anxious and nervous and about it, and be happy instead with that which is works. Zo matas Elohim he. This is a gift of God. He's used that term, gift of God, several times, right? If you remember, he used it before when he talked about, I'm thinking, what was that? Going back to the special, it slips my mind now, the person who is able to enjoy that which it is that God has given him. This is the special gift that this person has. So now, we're going to complete this chapter. Because there aren't many people that are going to remember your life and the days of your life. Let's face it. For the vast majority of us, a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations are going to go by, and no one's going to remember that we were here. So don't think that you're preserving something for this future or some posterity. The bottom line of it all is that we're here and then we're gone, and nobody's going to remember. And if they do remember, maybe some of us might accomplish and achieve things that might be remembered for a generation, for 50 years, for 100 years, 200 years. And then an even more select few might have some achievements in their life that are going to be remembered for many years to come. But those are those achievements. But this moment that you're living now, no one's going to remember it. Even that famous person, no one's going to remember 99% of the time that he or she spent on this world. So this moment, what you're doing is not for posterity. It's for this moment. Do the right thing for this moment. Ki ha'Elohim ma'aneh b'simchas libo. Because it is because it is God that gives him the joy of his life. Remember that this verse here, I kind of translated it the way some of the translators do when I started saying ki lo harbe yizkor. I want to use a different translation and explain for he will not remember, right? I'm sorry. Ki lo harbe, right? Yizkor et yimei chayav, because he will remember the days of his life are not many. So therefore, this person, right, will enjoy his life because it is God, right, who keeps him busy every single day, enjoying every single moment. Again, this is consistent with the Koran translation, which I advise you should look at and read. But the other way the way I started reading it is ki lo harbe. There are not many people that will remember the days of his life. And then you would read the second part of the verse, right? That, in other words, it's going back on the verse before. You should remember and enjoy every moment, right? Because not many people will remember the days of his life because, right, it is God who gives us joy, and therefore we should always remember to enjoy the moment. So this is the end of chapter 5. I'm sorry I got a little choppy at the last verse there because I was looking at a different translation, but this would conclude chapter 5. Although chapter 6 really continues on a similar topic, which we will do together when we study chapter 6. It'll take too long for me to continue, even though it continues in the same idea. So thank you so much for joining us for completing chapter 5 in Kohelet. I really appreciate that you joined me today to study. Looking forward to studying chapter 6 together, and of course the rest of this wonderful book of Kohelet. I wish you all a wonderful day.